So at the end of this video, you'll be fully equipped to come to Canada, get an admission on your own. Yes, I'm talking DIY. I'm talking dollars in your pocket. I'm talking admission by yourself. Okay, enough of it, you get it. Well, hello, beautiful people. It's your girl, Janey Booz, and I'm in the business of helping you thrive as a professional, newcomer, student, and entrepreneur in Canada. And this is Janey of Canada. If you're new, where have you been? And if you're returning and subscribed, thank you. I feel the love and I just want to shout you out for joining today. So, a couple of videos ago, I had an interview with Tunde Tash. You can check the video out here. And we both agreed, we came to common ground that the best way to migrate to Canada is to come as a student, okay? Again, if it's possible, okay? Now you are here saying, okay, Janey, how do I come to Canada as a student? Let's get right into it. And if you're looking for reasons as to why to come to Canada as a student, let me explain. You might have heard, if you've started researching, of this mythical phrase called Canadian experience. You see, Canadian experience is the phrase people use to explain to you why they cannot give you a job because you're a foreigner. Canadian experience is the phrase that recruiters or HR practitioners or general businesses in Canada use to I'm talking qualified professionals, to say, sorry, we can't give you this job right now. So wouldn't you love to actually circumvent that and just come as a student? That way you can actually get acclimatized to the economy before you start working and making that money. I got a lot of emails about people saying, oh, what is the chance of me getting a job in Canada if I migrate as a PR? Yeah, there's a high chance, but there's also a higher chance once they can see recognizable Canadian institutions on your resume. Now let's get into it. Can I just add a disclaimer to say that I am not an agent, I'm not an immigration agent, or nor an immigration lawyer. I'm just a girl who has DIY'd her entire Canadian journey up until now that I have my PR. Just as another disclaimer, this video is solely for people who are looking to do their postgrad and not their bachelor's or secondary education in Canada. However, there might be tips that you might be useful for you as well. So now let's get into it for sure now. Step one, you want to narrow your search. It's so hard and it seems super daunting or a task so insurmountable when you just think, I want to go to Canada, but I don't know where to go. So let's think about things that actually matter to you. One thing you know for sure is you, as an international student, you need a timeline. And that timeline starts anywhere from 1 year. So if you're watching this video now and you're trying to get into a school for 2020, you were late. I'm sorry, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but guess what? There's 2021, post this pandemic, hopefully, and you can come join us in Canada. So we've gotten that out of the way. You need to have at least a year before you apply. Second thing you want to do is go through a master list of all the schools in Canada. It's easier to narrow your search from there, right? Something to pay in mind, and this is number 2, but very important. As an international student, you can only go to schools that are called designated learning institutes. So every school that can accept international students, and what that means is that the government can issue you a study permit because you got an admission from that school, would have something called a DLI number. I have included a link in my description box to where to go find out all the schools that have a DLI. If a school doesn't have a DLI, do not waste your time or your money, okay? So start there. The next thing you want to do is narrow that search even further, right? What are you looking for? Are you looking for a university degree, like a master's, or are you open to doing something called a diploma or a certificate? I have a video where I've talked about the difference between a postgraduate certificate and university degree. Because if you're looking for a university degree, you'll solely be looking at universities. But if you're looking for a postgraduate certificate, which is a certificate that advances a bachelor's degree with experience and is more relative to the job market, then you are looking to colleges or institutes of advanced learning. But the best tip I always say is start with the end in mind when you're looking for schools. What kind of jobs, or what job are you doing now that you want to keep doing in Canada? Say you are an accountant right now in your home country. coming here to study accounting or financial management might be a good option for you. Maybe not creative arts, because that might raise the brow of the school, except you can, fully talk about why, and then we'll get to that process later on as well. So you should always start with the end in mind. What jobs do you want to do? What are the fields related to that job, or what are the programs related to that job? And you can work backwards. And also say from then on, the degree I have currently, does it match that degree I'm about to apply for, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So another thing to note is Canada has 10 provinces and territories, and 10 provinces, 3 territories, but that you can choose from. A lot of international students stick to the provinces because that is south of Canada. Anything above that line, those territories are freezing cold. You probably don't want to do that, right? So there are the west provinces and the east provinces. I'm in Ontario right now, and that's considered an eastern province, but it's even more provinces more eastward of Ontario. I also have a video where I talked about top 10 cheap schools in Canada, one of which is Memorial University of Newfoundland, which is even further east and is one of the cheapest universities in Canada. You might want to check that out. Which leads me to my next point, budget. That would help you narrow down what can you afford for tuition. A lot of schools in Ontario are pretty expensive, especially business schools. So say you wanted to get an MBA so bad, but you don't have that 50,000, 60,000 that the list MBA program in Canada affords. Maybe you might want to do something else, maybe a diploma in business management to start. If you're just looking to come to Canada, you want to break schools down based on the prices or rather the tuition costs, as well as the cost of living in that city. So I've said you should break it down by province, break it down by cost, break it down by the type of program you were looking to do, a diploma or certificate or a degree. So talking about breaking it down by provinces, for instance, people who are interested in oil and engineering, like chemical engineering and stuff, gravitate towards provinces like Alberta and Vancouver because jobs in that field are more prominent in those regions. However, there's a techie ecosystem that is very prominent in Ontario and in Quebec, and so there's a lot of people who are techies on this side. Another really important factor to consider is weather. It's the weather. So we all know Canada is cold, okay, but there are provinces that are colder than others. So for instance, we have fun words we say for provinces like Manitoba, we say Manisnoba, right? So it's really cold. And Montreal and Quebec is also quite cold. Ontario is quite cold as well, right? So however, places like Vancouver, maybe not as cold. So you want to Newfoundland sometimes gets really cold, but again, it depends, right? So you want to check the temperature year round to help you with your decision. Another point to consider when you're checking schools out is the school a big school or is it a smaller school? Because with bigger schools, typically public universities, for instance, the school I went to, Queen's Universities, the class sizes are pretty big. Are you the type of person that wants one-to-one interaction with a professor? Then maybe you should be looking to smaller schools like Concordia University in Edmonton in Alberta versus a big league university here in Ontario or Quebec, for instance. Another thing that you might put in mind too is the number of years you want to be in school for. So for instance, a master's degree can go anywhere from 1 to 2 years. Meanwhile, a postgraduate certificate or diploma would probably just be 8 months, some of which have 2 years as well. It depends. Another very important factor to keep in mind would be the ability to do something called a co-op or an internship. So co-op or internship is a way the international students can integrate to the Canadian workforce before they are done with school, right? You want to be able to have this opportunity. That was something that I was very intentional about when I was choosing the courses I wanted to come do in Canada. Because usually from a co-op, you can get a full-time job where if you're done with school, they can keep you on full-time if you do an excellent job. And so I find that that is an excellent way to choose the program you're looking to get into. Most colleges, because most postgraduate certificates and diplomas that come from colleges, because of the nature of the type of program, usually integrated co-op into their program, and that way you can assimilate into the workforce. Another thing to consider for sure definitely is the tests and the exams that are required for some schools. Some schools will have you doing GRE, GMAT, in addition to the language tests like IELTS and TOEFL. So you want to also maybe break down by that. So again, I'm dropping links in my description box that would help you even look at schools according to province and according to the exams that are required for those schools. Something to note for sure is if you come from an English-speaking country where your degree was instructed in English, for instance, you can submit an IELTS exemption to the school to say that you were instructed in English. And that way, you don't have to spend money doing the IELTS, you don't have to do an exam, all you have to do is apply. Which now brings me to the application piece. Another thing to consider when you are looking at your schools and deciding on what to do is where the school is located. Is it a school that is located in a city, or is it in a school that's located in a suburban or remote area? Some people really love being in the heart of a city. For instance, here in Toronto, Ryerson University and University of Toronto downtown are in the heart of the city. Well, however, schools like York University are outskirts of Toronto, and even further out, we have schools like Waterloo that are in a different region. Another way to break down what schools you want to go to is some people will actually do top rankings. If you're really interested in going to top schools in Canada, you can actually look at the top 10 universities for insert your program right there, and Google will help you break this down. So which brings us to the next step, which is your applications. So 3 things I know that most programs or most schools always require are your study history. So that would be your certificate of graduation, from your bachelor's degree, for instance, as well as your work history in your application if you've graduated and you've been working. And then your statement of interest. Your statement of interest is the chance to show how unique you are. This is what that most schools will use in addition to your grades, what most schools will use to decide if they're going to go with you or if they're going to go with another student who has applied as well. So you want to show how unique you are in this letter. You want to state why you're interested in that program. You also want to state how you're going to make the world a better place at the end of your program. You want to also talk about the correlation between the program you intend to study as well as your previous degree or your work experience. And most importantly, why you want to do the program in that school. Because it's, again, like a job application. Why us? Okay? And then you want to have strong referrals. I appeal that these referrals are your professors or your managers if you have worked as well, or a mix of both, okay? And now this is the fun part. So those are all the steps really in getting started with deciding on a school to apply to Canada. And this is the fun part. Now let me give you some tips that help me navigate this process. Tip number 1, and I've said this earlier in the video, is start with the end in mind. Think about the job you want to be doing in Canada when you're done with school. A way to help you is to look at something called an in-demand jobs in Canada list. You can Google this, and this list will help you decide on what program to study. Just for an example, at first when I was done with my IT, I really thought I wanted to do advertising. And after 2 years of advertising account management in Humber, I realized, nope, I wasn't going to do that because the jobs didn't pay quite well, especially for an international student. And it wasn't also aligned with my passion. So another thing to keep in mind is, yes, it might be a top ranking job, but if your passion doesn't align with it, then it might not be the best idea. Okay? Tip number 2, connect before you commit. So before you decide on what schools you're going to apply to and give them your change as well as your interest, connect with the school. Call them and ask any clarifying questions. Ask them about life in the city, what the class size looks like, what kind of professors. Again, if this information is not available online, if they have any scholarship or grant options, as well as what residency and life on campus looks like. Another way to do this is also to reach out to people who are attending that program through social platforms like LinkedIn or Facebook groups, because answers to your questions will help you narrow down. And another tip I actually came to a realization on my own after getting no's from 7 schools when I first applied, was a strategy I used in the second time around, was to spread my net. You heard me. Spread your net. Don't just get so focused and say a friend of yours has told you, oh, I got into this school, this is what it took me, this is the process, this is the money, and you're very dead set on going to that school, because guess what? You might not get in, and then you realize you have to wait another year until the next year before you start applying because applications have closed. So the best thing to do is spread it out. Spread it. Say you want to do, I'm going to make a MBA, for instance, and so what you're going to do is apply to MBAs in 3 colleges, for instance. So the tip is spread it out by, say, 3 universities and 3 colleges. That way you can either do a master's or you can do a diploma, because once you're in Canada, there's also options to actually upgrade your diploma to a degree. That's another thing to call and clarify with the school, okay? So a way I might suggest is you might spread your 3 universities into 3 different provinces and your colleges into 3 different provinces as well. And when you're applying, it doesn't really matter. It only matters once you get your admission and you decide on what school you want to go to. So those are my tips on how to come to Canada as a student, because once you're done with this entire process, you should be getting your admission, hopefully, if you did everything right. And if you need any help with doing the process, if you think this is too much, I can't do this on my own, I'm happy to introduce you to an immigration consultant that I trust and I work with to help you with the process. But if this video has been helpful for you, you know what to do. If you like it, like it. If you love it, you better start subbing. And I can't wait to see you on the next one. If you think there's anything I haven't covered, or if you have any tips to share with people, please leave it in the description box. I want to get to have real conversations with you. So tell me what other content you want to see, and I will make those videos out, okay? In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I hope this left a smile on your face, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Take care. Just as another disclaimer, this video is solely meant for people who are looking to do their post-graduation. Jesus.